guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the best horror villains of 2024. Starting this list is Mr. Crockett by the movie of the same name. In this Hulu original, Mr. Crockett is a mashup of Mr. Rogers and Charlie Manx from Nosferatu. He was the host of a children's television show, and due to a misunderstanding, he met a very grisly demise. Now, anytime a child watches his show on VHS, if the parent is abusive or neglectful in some way, he can pull the child into his show and then punish the parents for their abuse or neglect. So like I said, he's a lot like Charlie Manx, except he operates through a VHS and a television show, and he pulls kids into this other dimension. And there's definitely sort of a very freaky Five Nights at Freddy's feel, even more so than the actual Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Like, the animatronic puppets that are on his show are very disturbing and creepy. And in a lot of ways, this movie was kind of what I wanted Five Nights at Freddy's to be. So what makes the character Mr. Crockett so interesting to me is that, again, he is kind of like Charlie Manx in that he punishes these bad parents and he kind of saves some of these kids. Although some of the kids that he quote-unquote saves, their home situations really weren't that bad, and that's sort of whenever he starts to become a villain. But, you know, early on in the movie, we see him save a little girl from a very horribly abusive situation. So, again, so he's kind of a complex character in that, you know, his motivations are somewhat wholesome, even if his means and his judgment are a little questionable. Also, the character has a lot of charisma. He is played by Elvis Nolasco, who I've never seen in anything before, but I'll definitely be checking out his work in the future. Next up is Rodney in Woman of the Hour, played by Daniel Zovatto. Now, this character is based on a real person, although I feel like this movie took a lot of liberties with the truth. I think that they fabricated a lot of things that didn't happen in real life, so you know, this is kind of a character even though it is based on a real person and they use the real person's name. Right out of the gate, you get the feeling that something is very wrong with this character. Just the way that he asks questions and his very disturbing monotone voice, and then the way he becomes more and more threatening. It's almost like a switch flips. And this happens several times in the movie where he's being very charismatic and likable, and then, you know, as soon as no one's looking or as soon as the opportunity's right, he just, like, the switch just flips and he becomes a totally different person. Even though there's a lot of really great scenes of him, like, stalking women and being very threatening with women, because that is who he targeted in real life, honestly, I think one of the most disturbing scenes is whenever he's backstage with another contestant because they're on a dating show. This happened in real life. A serial killer was on a dating show, and the girl actually picked him, and she almost went on a date with him, and, you know, her gut told her, never mind, I don't want to do this, and she ended up backing out, and it probably saved her life. The most fascinating scene to me, I think, is whenever he was backstage with this other contestant, and they were kind of having a little pissing contest, and, you know, the guy's like, we're gonna fight, or something like that, and so they exchange phone numbers, seemingly, and then Rodney shows him a picture of one of his victims, and it's just shocking. The delivery of it, the way that Rodney, like, smirks and laughs, and, like, the fact that you can tell he's really getting off on the fact that this guy now knows his secret, even though he backtracks and he's like, oh, it's fake, you know, and he really genuinely thinks that he's smarter than everyone else, which was possibly part of his downfall, although the way that he got caught, which I will not spoil, the way that he got caught almost feels like a combination of him having a momentary lapse of judgment combined with luck. Yeah, so it's interesting though that he thinks he's smarter than everyone else and superior, and his cocky attitude is gross, like almost like a used car salesman gross. So you spend most of the movie just like really looking forward to this guy getting caught. I thought that the actor that played him did a great job of, again, just kind of showing when that switch flips and whenever he goes from being charming and charismatic to being an absolute psychopath who, quite honestly, gave me the chills. The next baddie on this list is Cooper from the movie Trap, played by Josh Hartnett. So Cooper is the father to a teenage girl, and like a good father, he takes her to see this pop celebrity that she's obsessed with. And the entire movie, she's cute, but she's a lot in terms of all of her excitement. And Dad, we have to do this, and Dad, we have to do that. And he plays the doting father so well, but he has a very dark secret, which, spoilers if you haven't seen the trailer or, you know, watched like the first 10 minutes of the film, he's a serial killer, and he actually has someone imprisoned while he's at the concert, which is maybe not the best decision for a serial killer to make. but he does, and he's like checking on his prisoner on his phone while he's at the concert. At some point in the film, Cooper realizes that the police are onto him and he has to try to find a way to escape the venue without anybody noticing. And of course, he also has this dilemma of, do I abandon my daughter at this concert in order to try to get away? You know, how am I going to get out of this situation safely? And he comes up with all of these innovative ways to try to avoid the police just like on the fly. And to me, that makes him a really fascinating character, seeing how intelligent he is and how resourceful he is. And there's actually times where you're almost like rooting for him to get away, even though he's a very bad person, but just because he's so like intelligent and clever. And then you kind of have to remind yourself, oh, wait a minute, he needs to get caught. Although he does seem to be a genuinely loving father who loves his family. So it's really interesting, this sort of contradiction of who he is and how he's able to play a normal father so convincingly. Next up on my list of best horror villains of 2024 is Patty from the movie Speak No Evil, played by James McAvoy. So similar to the last character, Cooper, Patty plays a family man who has a son that is mute, and him and his wife live in the countryside, and he is a doctor, or so he says. And they invite this other couple to come stay with them, and very slowly he starts showing his true colors. One of the very first interactions they have with Patty is him convincing them to let their young daughter ride on a motorcycle with him, and even though he doesn't drive that far, that's still an incredibly dangerous thing, and it's, you know, a very shocking thing to ask a couple of people that are basically virtual strangers to let your only child go off with him on a motorcycle. But that's the character, and that's what makes him so fascinating, is that he's so charming and polite that he keeps convincing this couple to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. And honestly, that seems to be where he gets his gratification from. For a lot of villains, both real and fictional, I feel like they get their gratification from the kill. But for Patty, I really felt like he got gratification every single time he could convince this couple to lower their boundaries or to set aside their boundaries and let him get away with something that they were clearly uncomfortable with him doing. Boundaries were meant to be crossed. I feel like that's his motto, and it's really fascinating watching him continue to cross this couple's boundaries and get away with it, and even convince them sometimes that they're the rude ones, even though he clearly crossed a line and was inappropriate many times in this movie. Next up on my list of best horror villains of 2024 is Andrew from the movie Don't Move, played by Finn Wittrock. So the premise of this movie is really interesting to me. It's about a serial killer that poisons a woman with a paralytic drug that is going to make her completely immobile within 15 to 20 minutes. And of course, she has to escape and hide before he finds her, otherwise he's going to kill her. So this character is a little bit like the last two that I talked about, in that he's really good at sort of pretending to be a nice guy and being really charismatic and getting people to feel sorry for him whenever he gets caught in these very suspicious situations. And then, 3 seconds later, just being a completely cold-blooded psychopath. But there's more to it than that. I think what really made this character stick with me is the explanation he gives to the main character as to why he does this and why he gets gratification from it and how it all started. Unlike Patty and Cooper, where we don't really get an explanation as to when their desires to kill started, we do get an explanation with Andrew, and I thought that it was really fascinating. The explanation he gives is that whenever he watched his ex-wife die, that for the first time in his entire life, he felt a connection with another human being. The whole speech he gives, the explanation itself isn't like that deep, but the speech that he gives when he's telling her that, he spent his whole life kind of faking it and not really feeling connected to anyone, and for the first time he felt the connection. Something about that just sent chills through me. I'm sure a huge part of it was the delivery of that speech, but yeah, it creeped me out so much, and it really stuck with me long after the movie was over. Finally, my number one horror villain of 2024 is Mr. Reed from the movie Heretic, played by Hugh Grant. This performance was absolutely amazing. It's one of those performances that really makes me wish horror movies were recognized by the Academy and by big award shows, because this was up there as like one of the best horror performances I've seen in a very long time. He just plays the innocent but like slightly perverse character so well. And I don't necessarily mean sexually perverse, because I didn't actually get a hint of that at all in the film. But basically what happens is that he invites these two Mormon girls into his house under the pretense of them teaching him about their religion. And he's like, oh yes, my wife is in the other room baking a pie. And they have this conversation where, it starts off pretty innocent and friendly. And then very, very subtly, it gets creepy. And some of the things that make it creepy are not things that you would find in the screenplay. It's just things that Hugh Grant brings on the screen in terms of, like the looks that he gives, the way that he says things, lots of sort of fake British politeness. And he just does such a good job of, again, kind of like Patty in that he kind of makes you question, well, was I the rude one? And like the girls are kind of laughing, but very awkwardly in like the first 20, 30 minutes of the film as they're having these conversations about religion. And, he starts to show that he has a lot of knowledge about religion and he's not nearly as clueless as he pretended to be at the beginning of the film. In fact, he thinks he has a lot to teach them. And it's just a really fascinating power struggle between these two teenage girls that come into his home with these completely pure intentions of trying to spread the word of Jesus to him and to save his soul. And he has some ulterior motives of bringing them in and him wanting to kind of indoctrinate them. Another thing that makes his character fascinating to me is as he kind of goes through all of the different religions and all of the research that he's done on religion throughout all of history, he's clearly a very big history nerd. And that looked kind of interesting to me because, there's a lot of horror villains that were great this year. Like I said, Patty getting off on crossing people's boundaries was interesting. Cooper and Andrew both kind of being family men with this dark side was fascinating. But I really kind of got a glimpse into Mr. Reed's obsession with religion and wanting to know about what happens after we die and kind of feeling as though religion might be a huge scam. And, all of the research that he's done and his faith basically in the fact that religion is a huge con. It just makes him really fascinating. It gives him depth, and I could actually see him as, my next door neighbor, or I could see him as, a professor at a college. I really could buy this as a genuine person who is real, who just has this dark obsession, and it ends up getting twisted in a way that he hurts some innocent people because of his convictions and his very dark interpretation of human behavior. And of course, huge ego. It takes a huge ego to basically kidnap people, by inviting them into your house and not letting them leave. That's kidnapping. With the intention of indoctrinating them. His intentions are not what you would expect. He's not a sexual predator. He doesn't really get off on murder. He just really wants to make these girls believe what he believes, at any cost. And he wants to manipulate them and cause them to question their faith and question the way that they view the world. And I think that his motivations make him fascinating. The details that we see of him reflected in his research also fascinate me. He's just a great character, and he's so interesting that immediately after I watched this movie, I was like, I'm ready to watch it again. So that is it. That is my list of best horror villains of 2024. I tried to keep the list somewhat short because I just wanted to focus on the characters and the performances that I thought were the absolute best of the year. But if you think that I missed one, please leave a comment below because I would love to hear your thoughts on what you thought the best villain was this year. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and vlogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.